Hey, hi, hello, and welcome back to another bookish video. Today, we are taking on the impossible and picking our favorite book from 2024, and there's a lot to pick between. I'm going to bring you along, so I've not pre-planned this. I am going to be whittling down my top books from 2024 until we can get to one, which sounds impossible right now, but I'm bringing you along. So let's figure out what our favorite book of 2024 was. So first I want to share that I read 152 books last year. Of those 152 books, we have exactly 31 5 stars. So my first step is going to be to go through these 5 stars and kind of figure out where they really land. My first step is going to be to break them down into 4 categories. So my 4 categories are 6-star read. These are for the ones where 5-star just doesn't even feel enough. Then we've got it was a solid 5 stars, which means months later, still enjoying it, still think it deserves those 5 stars. Then we have great but forgettable. This is going to be very interesting because some of these have been read over a year ago, so it's, some of them I may not remember as well as others. And then the final one is not standing by this rating, which means it's been some time and I wish I hadn't rated it 5 stars. So we'll go through each of the books and kind of see where things lay out, and we'll just go one by one. All right, so starting with Binding 13, this is the first book of the Tobin Brothers series. I loved it. I think we're going to see a few from that series on this list. This one sparked that love, so I'm sticking with it, and we're going to put it in a 6-star read. Then we have the Book of Lost Names. This was a historical fiction that was actually recommended by a friend in a surprise 5-star. I loved how things came full circle in this one, so I'm gonna go solid 5 stars. Keeping 13. This is the sequel to Binding 13. Really, the two of them together are a single story. If I'm honest, the first one pulled me in a little bit more, so I think I'm going to drag this one down to solid 5 stars. The Friend Zone. I remember it being a rom-com book. It made me chuckle, but truth be told, I'm kind of forgetting much beyond that. So, great but forgettable. Next, we have Pretty Things by Janelle Brown. Sadly, I'm going to have to put this one in forgettable as well. I remember it being good thriller. I don't remember it pulling me in and can't put it down type thriller. So good, not great. Where's the butcher gonna go? First of all, I think Jennifer Hillier is a sleeper Asian author. She doesn't get as much as the Riley Sagers of the world in thriller, but every one of her books that I have read has been a 4-star plus. This one is not an exception. I actually think this is going to 6-star read. This book was about a young man who moves into his grandfather's house because his grandfather is moving into retirement phase of his life. And as he's organizing his house, he discovers that his grandfather has secrets, which is particularly interesting because he also was the chief of police. So whew, that one was good. Check and Mate. I love this one. This is a 6-star. I love Allie Hazel, period. This was her first dabble into YA. I have this fascination with chess players. I think it is such a cool world, and learning about it and the rankings and everything. I love the book, but I also just really love the story. I remember afterwards I was playing chess online almost every night because the story got me so into it. It was just that much fun. So yeah, that one we're sticking by. All right. Next we have the Mind F series. I put this all as one book. It was on Kindle. It's packaged as a single book, but the series is interesting. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to stay not standing by my rating. I think there was shock value in it when I first read it. I will say this, the cover, and this is the more PG rated cover on here. Their other cover is way more graphic. Don't judge this book by the cover, because I did. For a while, I didn't read it because of the cover. It really was a good book. I think I'm still saying it probably a 4-star if I were to think back about it. I know we've got one of 2 nonfiction books, which is Britney Spears' book. I'm not standing by this rating. It was interesting. I find her story interesting in general. I left the book kind of like I left the documentary, of feeling like this is one side of the story. So not sticking there. Still good. The Stand. We're going to put The Stand up at a solid 5-star. I have slowly been working through Stephen King's books. I don't think I've found any that I didn't like. I have found some I liked more than others. The Stand was one my mom told me to read, and I'm so glad she did, because this was a beast of a book, and I probably wouldn't have picked it up without her telling me to. It opens with this strain of a disease getting out that kills almost the entire world. Some people just happen to be immune, and I love those kind of dystopia-esque books, so already it was in the winning category for that reason. But it actually very much turns into this good versus evil, almost in so it's almost like a fantasy in the way that like the devil kind of is involved, and like the good versus evil have like spirits talking to them, and it's interesting. It was a really interesting read. It had a ton of characters. I had to take notes of the whole book to understand it all, but it was worth it in the end because it was really good. The Quiet Tenant, I actually talked about this one in a recent video. I'm keeping up with 6-star. This kind of book fascinates me. The premises is this woman is held captive to such an extent that she doesn't run when she has the chance. And she almost ends up like captive but embedded in this family. The psychology behind that is just super interesting to me. All right. Before we continue, drop a comment because I want to hear what are some of your favorite books from last year, because I will probably be picking them up. So let me know down below, what was one of your favorite books from 2024? All right, jumping back up to Michael Connelly's The Lincoln Lawyer. Obviously, this is an older book. Well, so was The Stand. Where am I landing with this? I don't think I'm standing by the rating. Sorry. It was a good story. A good enough story I continued along with the series, and I watched a little bit of the TV series as well. So it's a classic like crime courtroom drama with a little bit of a twist of the main lawyer, the Lincoln lawyer, kind of breaks the mold of what lawyers typically are portrayed as. So it was interesting. I'm glad I read it. It's not going to make the top. Funny story, Emily Henry's book from last year. I'm teetering between 6-star and 5-star. I think honestly it's going to 6-star. I think the only reason I'm teetering is because it is not my favorite of Emily Henry's works, but it's still up there. It's still good. So this book is kind of forced proximity, strangers to lovers, rom-com book. The premises is basically two people are forced to live in an apartment after dealing with a very bad breakup on both of their ends. And they kind of come together through shared grief, and things pursue from there. And just like a lot of Emily Henry's books, it's cheeky, it's fun, but there's also like power behind the love story that she tells. I mean, Emily Henry knows how to do romance, period. All right, How to Walk Away by Catherine Center. This is going to go right up to 6-star read. First of all, Catherine Center, you think rom-com. I don't put this with her typical books. I love all of her books. This one is so much more deep and powerful, and it's basically this girl gets engaged, goes up into an airplane, crashes, barely makes it, and then her life after that. And it's just really interesting because they go from like happily engaged to, okay, we're literally facing in sickness and health right now. Is he truly the man for her based off of what is going on right now? And it's just, oof, that's what got me in the feels. All right. The final scene, surprisingly, I'm going with solid 5-star. This is a thriller without many surprise twists, shocking reveals, any of that. It was still really, really good. It stuck with me. The premises is there are these crazy cuckoos who are trying to live out their lives through forcing other people to basically enact them. So they kidnap people and tell them, you're this character, you're this character, you're this character, and now go act. And the rest of it comes from there. There have been other actors, aka captives, that didn't do their job well and are no longer there. So it's dark. I will give you that for sure. Very interesting. And much like The Quiet Tenant, you've got that kind of captive, what do you do when you're in these situation vibes, which the more I talk about it, clearly is one of my go-to tropes. Next, we have The Darling Girls, which I am pulling all the way up to 6-star. I am hit or miss on Sally Hempworth. I'll say that from the beginning. Darling Girls was a hit. Oh my goodness. I like books where you have kind of the childhood trauma and what happens now that you're an adult. And that's exactly what happens here is you've got this group of darling girls who all ended up in the home of this woman who was out of the kindness of her heart taking in all these kids that didn't have families. Not so kind because things come out. And what's interesting is that this does not take place when all the bad things are happening. Instead, this is taking place in the future because a body is found at that house years later because there's construction going on. So the girls are kind of coming back together and reliving their memories, trying to figure out why is there a body here and what does that mean? So interesting for sure. Before I let you go, I'm going with solid 5 stars. Thank you, TikTok. That is what I will say to this book. I don't think I would have picked this one up. It didn't sound that interesting to me, and everyone kept raving, and I'm like, let's just do it. Let's just see, because it's about a couple going through a divorce, and as a married woman, I'm kind of like, I don't need to read that. Like, I'm quite content in my relationship, thank you. But this author knows how to write feelings. Wow. And character develops like nothing I've ever seen before, because you hear the plot of, oh, it's a couple that might get divorced, and you're kind of like, oh, that's it. But it is powerful, and I do want to continue to read some of her other books that have come out since then. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Gray After Dark. I think we're going solid 5 stars. And the reason is this one kind of started a spark, as you will, that had me pick up other books. It's funny because now I'm looking at it and I feel like the final scene, I'd put these two together. They're both like more cut and dry thrillers. There's not huge twists, but there's lots of action. So Gray After Dark is about this woman who is working at a summer camp. She's also an Olympic athlete. I believe in like skiing or cross-country skiing. It's something winter related. She runs to train during the summer. So she's running to train during the summer when someone captures her and brings her in. Like her being captured, I mean, that's part of it, but it's also the people that are coming to save her and help her. And there's a little bit of a romance to it. It kind of comes along the way. Here's what I think I discovered from this book. First of all, I'm obsessed with the Olympics. All my friends know when the Olympics come around, I like shut down for 2 weeks and I watch everything. Not just the big sports. I will watch the trials for curling, which, by the way, it's going on right now. I will watch any Olympic sport, period, end of story. So anytime there's any Olympic anything, I'm kind of like, oh, let's do it. And I think that's kind of what I discovered in this book was the thriller was good, but the backdrop of having Olympic athletes in it, I really liked. So, all right, next we have Yes, Please. Here, this one is great but forgettable for a perfect reason, which is a friend of mine recommended it. I got it on audiobook, listened to half of it, and then I'm like, I've read this book before. So it was literally by definition forgettable because halfway through I'm like, I've read this. This is not my first time. Still good. The Husbands is an interesting book. I think I'm going 6 star on this one. It kind of goes into that sci-fi-ish genre, but not more in the sense that it makes you really think through things. And so the premises of The Husbands is the main woman has this magical attic, and every time a husband goes into the attic, he comes out a new husband. And so like part of it is her trying to figure this out, but part of it is also like, oh God, this guy's a dud. Can you go get me the lights from the attic? And then here comes another one. And then, ooh, this one's a winner. Don't go to the attic. So it's a little bit of that, but also I like how the author turned this concept into a story that had a clean ending that was almost romantic. Like there was a little romantic twist to the end and how they solve the problem of the attic. So that was really fascinating. I liked it a lot. Kill for Me, Kill for You. This is another one that I'm teetering between solid 5. I think I'm going to a solid 5. No, I might go to... No, I'm going solid 5. This is a take on Strangers on a Train, which is the concept of if you go after someone that you have a grudge against, it's probably going to get tracked back to you. So instead, if you're just randomly on a train one day and you meet a stranger, you guys can commit to killing the other person for you and no one gets caught. That's the premises of it. In this case, it's actually a woman who lost her daughter and husband because her husband committed suicide after losing the daughter. And they know who did it, but they can't prove it. So she meets someone in an emotional support group that says she's going to help. This one's got twists. It is not all that it seems. We'll just put it there. All right, let's keep going. We've got The First Day of Spring. So I just had to look up the summary of this because that's how much I remembered it. And I guess that says it all. So I guess I can't stand by that rating. Daydream is an easy 6 star. To me, this is the best one of Hannah Grace's stories. Period. If you haven't read her series at all, they can stand alone, but Daydream, which is the 3rd in the series, is my favorite, mainly because I think Henry is the greatest character ever. Swiped was good. I think I'm putting Swiped at 6 stars. This is a thriller, but it's based on like the concept of like a Tinder-esque serial killer. Everyone this girl goes out with that she meets through Tinder, it's not called Tinder in the book, but everyone that she meets ends up dead, which is weird. And she's like trying to figure it out and also like a little afraid to keep dating. And yeah, that was a good one. I mean, I've got Redeeming 6 and Taming 7 on here. This is part of the Binding 13 series that I mentioned earlier. That's all the way up at here. It's 6 star read. There's 5 books in the series. I thought Redeeming 6 was kind of probably one of the worst. Still great, but not holding up to that. And I also think Taming 7, I think I'm gonna put it great. Again, it was a good story. This is Joey's story, who you meet. He's the brother of the main girl in Binding 13. And what's weird is I think I liked more hearing updates on her in Taming 7 than I did his story. Still really good, but doesn't hold up to that. I'm gonna put Fast Girls up at a solid 5 stars. This is another one I read when I was missing the Olympics, and it is about the first ever female track stars that go to the Olympics. So it's historical fiction, but it is fascinating what these girls had to go through, because most people didn't think women should be competing in the Olympics, especially in strenuous sports. And they actually talked about some of the rules and regulations in place for the fairer gender, because they just didn't think they could handle what the women were doing. Trickle that down to the fact that the women that wanted to be track stars, 1, didn't have areas to train. 2, it was hard to get the support for it. Like, a lot of parents and families and coaches said no. So there's a lot of adversary in this book, and it's just a good read. Taylor Jenkins Reid, Carrie Soto makes a comeback. I'm putting up at a solid 5 stars. This was another thank you book talk, booktube, because I wouldn't have picked it up based off of the description. The entire plot of the story is Carrie Soto is a famous tennis player and she is making a comeback. That is the premises of the story. It sounds like a very basic surface level story, but the way the author portrays this character, and also portrays the hardship behind coming back as an athlete and aging, it was just done really, really, really well. My next 2 books are from the Whitsack series. I've got Find Me and Save Me on here. There are additional books. Every one of these books was 4-star plus for me. These 2 just happened to be the 5 stars. I'm going to put Find Me as a solid 5 star, but I'm going to put Save Me as not standing by the rating. And the reason is this series on the whole is phenomenal. I think if this series had been a book, I would give that book 5 stars. Across the board. I think where it breaks down is if I'm going to get nitpicky, each individual book doesn't wrap up a plot line, and that always bugs me within a series. I still want to have closure at the end of the book, even if it's not all the closure. I want some pieces solved. And this whole series is about this girl who's in witness protection because a former teacher has been stalked her, found her, killed her entire family, and now she's in danger. She's going into witness protection in the very beginning of the first book. And so some of it is about the trauma from that, but this is also a dark romance. And there's a neighbor that she falls in love with, and neighbor has a twin and other brothers that she also loves. Leave it there. It was a fun read. I just don't think it's 6-star worthy. How My Neighbor Stole Christmas. This was a good one. I think I'm going great but forgettable. I think this story was perfect to read when I read it, which was obviously Christmas time. It made me laugh out loud. The whole premises is it's the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, but rated R with romance. There's a competition part where they're all trying to be the most Christmassy, and both the male and female love interests kind of hate Christmas in this town for one reason or another. And so there's a lot of kind of let's mess with each other, but also there's feelings there. So the banter's great. It makes you laugh. But I don't think it sits in the 6 or 5 stars. So we did it. So looking at this breakdown, we've got 10 in the top row. I could not have planned that better if I tried. Just glancing through and looking at what made it to the top, I'm not surprised that I've got such a variety. I think that speaks to me as a reader. I've got thrillers and romances and a few wild cards in there also. To my 5 stars, is there any I feel need to bump up? Looking at the solid 5 stars, I feel The Stand is borderline moving up. I feel Kill for Me, Kill for You could borderline move up. I think I'm good with where they are. So we've got a top 10. Now it's time for the going to get tough. So as I look at these top 10, I think my next step is going to be coming up with a top 5 within those top 10. This is not going to be easy. Okay, let's dive in. I kind of want to go through and break them down into do I think it's probably top 5 versus not? And hopefully I'll end up with 5 or 4, but we'll kind of see. So first, we've got Binding 13. I think Binding 13 is going to be in my top 5. Then we have The Butcher, which was really good, but I think in the end, it's probably not. Check and Mate. I think when it comes down to it, because I had a lot of joy reading Check and Mate, but I don't remember as much about the romance as I do the chess side of it, so I think I'll bump that one down. My gut tells me The Quiet Tenant is going to be in the top 5. I think I'm gonna say no to Funny Story, and I might revisit that one. How to Walk Away, top 5. Darling Girls, top 5. Oh, I'm gonna have too many top 5s. See, I wanna put Husbands up here. Husbands is top 5, and now I've got 2, and I feel like Daydream needs to be up there. So we're putting Daydream up there, and then we'll look at it. And then Swiped, I'm okay with putting Swiped not in the top 5. Okay, so I've got a top 6. Binding 13, The Quiet Tenant, How to Walk Away, Darling Girls, Husbands, Daydream. And I have to kick one of those out to come up with the top 5. This hurts. I think I'm either gonna knock out How to Walk Away or Darling Girls. I think I'm gonna knock out Darling Girls only because the twist didn't pull me in as much as I kind of expected it to. So we need a drum roll. Our Binding 13, The Quiet Tenant, How to Walk Away, The Husbands, and Daydream. So we've got 5. I feel like my next goal is going to be to get to a top 3, and this is starting to get painful. Okay, so top 3, looking at this list, feels impossible already. Okay, I think Daydream has to go in the top 3. I love Daydream. It was the best of the series, and I related so much to Henry. I think that's what it comes down to, is like, Henry. It's all Henry. And here's the thing, I am the worst at remembering characters, and I will not forget Henry's name. That says a lot. Okay. Next one going in the top 3 is Binding 13. Binding 13 I read in January of 2024 and then proceeded to read the rest of the series. And that says a lot. Now we're sitting here in February of 2025 and I'm still remembering details from a book I read in January of 2024. So I think Binding 13 makes the list. And then I think for my last spot, I'm between the Quiet Tenant and Husbands. And I think, and it's going to shock me to say this because I think I'm going to put Husbands next, which means I don't have a thriller in my top 3 from last year, which is bizarre. So the top 3 are Daydream, Binding 13, and Husbands. So now we get to go put them in order and come up with our best book of 2024. Are any of these in your best books of 2024? I will be so excited if I see some of you guys commenting about some of these books, but I'm also gonna be really excited when you comment about other books that I then get to read. Oh, I'm so torn already. I think if I just look at how I talked about the books, I think number 3 is obvious. So I think 3 goes to Husbands. And the reason is I'm thinking about how I've talked about Binding 13 and Daydream, and the Husbands I loved, and I love this book. Do not discount the fact this is a 3rd place. But I think the concept was phenomenal. I think the way the author ended it was so cute and honestly a little romantic. I kind of have 3 borderline romances in my top 3. But there are parts of it that in my mind I cannot remember as detailed. So I think that in itself tells me like it was a good book, but it's number 3. Oh, and then we've got Binding 13 versus Daydream. And like, guys, when I tell you this is not what I'd expect to be talking about for my top 2. I love Hannah Grace's books. She wrote Daydream. When she came out with her first book, the only reason I picked it up is because like the past figure skater of me was like, oh my God, the real world is reading a figure skating book. How cool, let's pick it up. And then I loved it. I didn't love the cover. I thought it looked juvenile. And both of these books have characters that are in like high school, college age, which usually is not where I'm going to gravitate towards. So I feel like these are not indicative of who I am as a reader, but it does go to show me that I need to read books that I normally wouldn't pick up because evidently they become my top 3. That being said, I think my book of the year has to be Daydream. I think that gets my number 1 spot and Binding 13 gets number 2. I think when it comes down to it, there's just so much I related to in Henry's story, in Daydream, and I love the world that this character has created. I love the relationship so much more than just the romance, the friendships and the camaraderie between teammates and everything else just comes together. So 2024 book of the year is Daydream. I'm happy with that. I am. Hopefully this year we get some thrillers that crack the top because I need more thrillers, evidently. I need more thrillers that are noteworthy enough to make it to the end. That's probably the better way of saying it. There you have it. My favorite book of 2024, Daydream. Let me hear from you guys. What was your favorite book from 2024? Make sure you drop a comment below. And if you haven't gotten a chance yet, please subscribe to this channel and like this video. And I will see you guys all for my next video. Bye guys.